Again, if you guys are trying to enter the Google Meet around 8:25, 8:30, I was having a problem with it. I just finally was able to get it to work, so glad you guys kept trying and didn't give up, because I know some students would have said that. No, this is the only slide for today, so you're copying down everything. All right, so let's get started. So the focus question is, why was the Gettysburg Address so impactful back in history and still today? So we're going to look at a speech given by Abraham Lincoln on November 19th, 1863. This is after the Emancipation Proclamation. This is a few months after the Gettysburg Battle. And Lincoln's going to give a very famous speech there. He didn't intend for it to be famous, but it has transformed the test of time for a couple different reasons. We'll talk about kind of all the reasons. We'll listen to a version of the speech. It's only 3 minutes long, so it's actually a great speech to listen to. But we're going to kind of go through and figure out, why was this such a important and impactful speech in American history. Now, you can maybe say it's the most important speech in American history, the most influential speech in American history. It's right up there with Martin Luther King's I Have a Dream speech, okay, in terms of its popularity and its notoriety with a lot of people. You may even recognize some parts of it, okay? But we're going to go through and really break down why this speech was so important. So, first, Lincoln met the families of the Union soldiers lost at the Battle of Gettysburg. So what he decided to do, and the Union decided to do, he decided to invite the lost soldiers' families from Gettysburg. So they invited them from all over the country, and they wanted to invite them there to have a little bit of a memorial. And he also actually invited some Confederate families as well, though not as many Confederate families, if any, even showed up. But he invited all Union families, all Confederate families of the soldiers who were lost. And his goal was that day, okay, was to basically, why they were all meeting, is they wanted to turn Gettysburg battlefield into a national cemetery. Now, my brother's big into history as well. He's been to Gettysburg probably over 10 times in his life. He knows it inside and out. He knows a lot about it. And if you were to go there today, it is a cemetery. Okay. Now, they also have a lot of Gettysburg history. We had seen how this was the biggest battle in the war. So Lincoln thought it would be a nice gesture to kind of bring everyone together here. Also, just kind of a little note, I don't know why, but this is also going to be our first national Thanksgiving right around this time. So some, major things happen around this time. So Gettysburg was being turned to a national cemetery, and then Lincoln gives this speech. And then in that speech, he kind of wants to have the goal of also trying to inspire the Union soldiers and the families to stay positive and to keep fighting in the Civil War. We'll see kind of how he does that when we get to the speech. What makes it one of the most famous speeches of all time, and why it's something we're learning about in 2020? Because, listen, presidents give speeches all the time. Why was this one so particularly important? It came at a time where basically a lot of people needed to hear something positive, okay, needed to be reminded of some things. And it stood the test of time because it can be interpreted as a message not only to the people there, but a message to future generations. All right. So it's not just a message to the people at Gettysburg. If you listen to the speech as we're about to, um, I want you to almost think of it as Lincoln talking to you personally. And there's a lot of that, okay, where Lincoln does kind of go through it. All right. So I'll give you another 30 seconds to copy this down. And then we're going to go listen to the speech and do the assignment, which is going to be on the Google Doc. So if you're done, you could open up the Google Doc. All right. Friendly reminder. Tomorrow, on Wednesday, there is your Unit 2 test. We're getting towards the end of Unit 2. Obviously, Monday will be pretty much wrapped up with all of the material from the Civil War. And, the second period on Monday will be a review. And so we'll kind of do Tuesday will be a review. But it's a pretty big test. It's your first grade for the second marking period. So it's you want to get off to a good start, obviously. So make sure you're studying. So keep that in mind. But here is the actual speech. Okay. You guys can follow along here as the speech is going. If you notice, it's not long. Okay. It's like less than 3 minutes. It's like 2.5 minutes long. I've already been talking to you so far for more than 6 minutes. Okay. I haven't said anything of note. I haven't really said anything enlightening. Lincoln's able to say so much in less than 2.5 minutes, and that's really a remarkable thing. So we're going to look at the speech, then we're going to break it down, and then we're going to continue the assignment. If you see, you have some analysis questions, and then you have some DBQ practice questions, which you'll do towards the end. But let's listen to the speech. All I want you to do is to start. Even if you don't get much of the meaning just now, that's okay. Try and listen to the tone of the speech. How does Lincoln give the speech? There is not a known audio recording of the speech. We have his written speech that we know he gave. We have testimony of how he kind of gave the speech. Okay. And the way this kind of worked out was he was one of like 10 speakers, and he was the last one to go. So all the speakers that went before him, people were kind of just like, hearing the same type of speech. And then he came in and gave the speech and just left the place in awe, sort of thing. All right. So I'm going to look at why it's so impactful and so important. For me to do this, I have to share this screen. Okay. And you're going to hear an actor portraying Lincoln the way he would have sounded at that point in time. Okay. And you're also going to listen to how Abraham Lincoln gave this speech through the actor. So though it's not him, though there is a picture of him right there if you're looking at, we're going to actually look at the speech from here. So I'll keep the text up here as the speech goes, but I'll mute myself so you guys can hear it.
Today, President Abraham Lincoln stood at the site of one of the most important battles of the U.S. Civil War in Gettysburg, Pennsylvania. A crowd of some 15,000 had gathered to consecrate a cemetery for Union war dead. Though brief, the now famous Gettysburg Address marked a defining moment of the Civil War. Actor Sam Waterston has portrayed President Lincoln on stage and screen.
77 years ago, our fathers brought forth on this continent a new nation, conceived in liberty and dedicated to the proposition that all men are created equal. Now we are engaged in a great civil war, testing whether that nation, or any nation so conceived and so dedicated, can long endure. We are met on a great battlefield of that war. We have come to dedicate a portion of that field as a final resting place for those who here gave their lives that that nation might live. It is altogether fitting and proper that we should do this. But in a larger sense, we cannot dedicate, we cannot consecrate, we cannot hallow this ground. The brave men living and dead who struggled here have consecrated it far above our poor power to add or detract. The world will little note nor long remember what we say here, but it can never forget what they did here. It is for us, the living, rather, to be dedicated here to the unfinished work which they who fought here have thus far so nobly advanced. It is rather for us to be here dedicated to the great task remaining before us, that from these honored dead we take increased devotion to that cause for which they gave the last full measure of devotion. That we here highly resolve that these dead shall not have died in vain, that this nation, under God, shall have a new birth of freedom, and that government of the people, by the people, for the people, shall not perish from the earth.
Okay, guys, that's the speech. All right, so if it's a little tough for you to see or understand why it was such an impactful speech, I really want to take our time and break down, what made this speech so important. All right, so what we're gonna do is I'll do a couple of these with you. I think I'll do the first one with you, and then I'll probably do the fifth one with you, and then I'll leave the rest for you to kind of figure out. Yeah, the last part's pretty popular. Okay, that government of the people, by the people, shall not perish from the earth. Okay, that's a pretty famous part. His beginning part of the speech is also pretty important too. 7 years ago, that's a pretty famous thing that Abraham Lincoln came up with. So let's look at why this is actually important. So the actual text says 7 years ago. Okay, so let's just start with there. Does anyone know how long a length of time a score is without looking it up? I'm just curious. I'm not impressed if you know it. I'm just curious. Do you know how long a score is? Like a decade's 10 years, a century's 100 years, millennium's 1,000 years. How long is a score? Does anyone know? Okay, Abigail said 20. Correct. All right, so I know I'm not Mr. Peduzzi, but we're going to do a little math here. So he says 7 years ago. So when you do 4 score, right, you do 4 times 20. And then when you see the word and in math, okay, you add 7. So 80 plus 7 is 87 years ago. Right there, the question you should kind of ask yourself, yeah, this is easy math, right? This is all you need when you get older, right? No, I'm kidding. That's all the math you need. Be able to add little things, man. No, I'm kidding. All right, so 87 years ago. All right, so I think the first thing you need to do is you need to figure out 1863 was the speech. What happened 87 years ago? Tell me. What date was 87 years before 1863? Look at you guys getting your calculators out. Come on, simple math. I can do this in my head. Okay, 1776. What happened now? Okay, make the connection. You guys are in Regents. What happened in 1776? I'm not a big dates guy, but this is kind of one of those things you should know. The Declaration of Independence. Okay, excellent. You guys are following with me. Great. So 87 years ago, our founders wrote the Declaration of Independence. There's a reason he's bringing up the Declaration of Independence here in the moment where we brought forth our continent with the Declaration of Independence. Okay? And specifically, we want to go back to the line that we talked about in the Declaration of Independence, right? That there's life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. Okay, he talked about that. But then there's the key part, right? That all men are created equal. So our country was created under freedom and the idea that all men were created equal. Now make the connection, either in the chat or unmute yourself. Why is that a thing he's bringing up right now? Why is that important, and why is it important to say now? Go ahead, Abigail.
Well, I think it's because when we were fighting in the Civil War, there weren't women allowed in the war, and women weren't like a big thing at this point yet, and they weren't allowed to do much. So that's why I think that's why he said all men, and why they're including men. Okay. Not a bad thought, because, women from that perspective haven't been treated equally. Again, Tiana, what else?
I was thinking about slavery, since slaves were treated different, and white or like their citizens were treated different. So I think that he was reminding them that we are all equal and we should all have freedom, no matter like how we are.
Okay. So what I would say, Abigail, is you're probably like 5 to 10% right. There's maybe some notion of that, but the reason why, to our understanding, why Lincoln brings it up is he's kind of pointing out the fact that we created our country, that all men, all people are created equal. Yet we have this African-American group, we have these slaves that are not being treated equally. And I say the African-American group because now after Dred Scott versus Sandford, okay, African-Americans can't be citizens. So we brought our country together. The idea of our country was that all people are supposed to be equal, yet we're not living up to that standard, right? Since we're not living up to the standard, we need to fight for that. Now, this is one of the first times Lincoln really comes out and doesn't make this a war about preserving the Union. He makes this a war about ending slavery. And you can see that in the speech here because he goes back to the Declaration of Independence. Okay? Now, he's giving that speech to kind of let everyone know, hey, this is why we're fighting the war. He's reminding everyone of that. Okay? Now, you guys will do box 2, box 3, and box 4 on your own. I would like to do box 5 together because I think lines 13 to 15 is where Abraham Lincoln just subtly stops talking to the people there and starts talking to us here. And I think this is why the speech is so inspirational in a lot of ways, because it can be interpreted as a speech towards us and trying to inspire us. Okay? So, it is rather for us to be here dedicated to the great task remaining before us. So I'm going to stop right there. Okay, I'm going to break it down piece by piece. What is the great task remaining before us? Okay, well, at this point, okay, the Civil War is not over. Okay, since the Civil War is not over, since it's not finished, they have to finish the Civil War. And they has to win. He's going to talk about why the Union has to win. All right. The next part he goes into, which we'll read right here, that from these honored dead, we take increased devotion to that cause for which they gave the last full measure of devotion. So they are on a battlefield of Gettysburg, which is still to this day the bloodiest battle in American history. Tens of thousands of soldiers fighting for the cause to preserve the Union and to end slavery now are dead because of it. What does it mean when someone gives their last full measure of devotion? I'll leave that in the chat, or if you guys want to mute yourself. What does it mean when you give your last full measure of devotion? Someone gives their last full measure of devotion. Where are they giving? Go ahead, Abigail.
Is it like when you pay like your respect and tribute to the people who died or people who like risked their lives or made a big impact on history?
Okay, you're on the right track. And Gentiana, you're kind of on the right track too. So when you give your last full measure of devotion, you give everything. You give your life up. Think about a soldier that dies in a war. Think about that. They're not living here anymore because they fought in a war and they're no longer here. Think about people around your life that give things up for you. Think about your parents. Think about, are they giving their last full measure of devotion? No, but they're giving a lot to you. You're sitting here and I'm sitting here right now because people have sacrificed for you to be here, whether that's your parents, whether that's soldiers from previous wars, whether it's previous people in history that have put us in the opportunity where we are now. A country without slavery, a country that has so many good things going for it, even throughout a crappy year of 2020, we're still a very fortunate country compared to the rest of the world. Okay? This is the biggest part, in my opinion, in the speech. That we here highly resolve that these dead shall not have died in vain. If you were to die in vain, what does that mean? What does it mean if you were to do something in vain? If you want to look that up, you can. But what does it mean if you were to die in vain? Dying because of pain? Not quite. Good guess. Vain pain. Excellent, Sade, excellent. They died for nothing. When you do something in vain, you died for no reason. Okay, very good, Yehia. Okay. So he says that we here have resolved that these dead shall not have died in vain. Okay? The soldiers, oh, I don't know why that happened, sorry. The soldiers that fought and died in this war cannot die for no reason. Okay, and I'll put in parentheses, in vain. Let's think about what that really means. This whole war was fought so we could preserve the Union and end slavery. If the South wins and we don't end slavery and the country doesn't go back together, every single Union soldier who fought and died then died for no reason. Okay? Whether you realize this or not, as you go further and further on in my class, you will realize the reason America is sitting here with all the freedoms and liberties that we have and all the equality that we have. Are we perfect? No, I'll never go on to say that we're perfect. But the reason we've gotten as far as we have is because there have been men and women who have fought in wars, who have sacrificed their lives, who have sacrificed a lot of their lives, and have died in these wars. And this is where the message turns to us. We should be living our lives so those soldiers did not die in vain. You don't want to live your life and make nothing of it, right? If people have sacrificed their lives, if your parents have sacrificed their lives, there have been people around that have sacrificed their lives in previous wars or whatever, then we as a people in 2020 and you as an individual should be trying to live your life in a good way so that those people didn't die in vain. When you look at World War II and how crazy World War II is and the people that had to fight there and had to invade D-Day and Pearl Harbor and all of these crazy things, and if you come out and live your life in a bad way, I basically take that as an act of saying screw you to the former soldiers. You should be living your life in a high standard because someone sacrificed their life in some way for you to be here. And if you look at it in the right way, many thousands of people, including soldiers and people in history, have sacrificed their lives for us to have the advantages we have today. And make no mistake, again, we are not perfect. Again, not every situation is great, but comparatively to history, we're a lot better than where we were. And that's because people sacrificed for us. All right, so Lincoln goes into a lot in this speech. That's another one. You are now going to try and do the same thing for this parts here, number 2, number 3, number 4. We don't even bring up lines 16 and 17 where he says, and that the government of the people, by the people, for the people shall not perish from the earth. Basically talking about how we have to fight to keep our government going. Our country is literally hanging in the balance. We need to keep fighting to make sure that our government doesn't perish, doesn't leave from the earth, which is another great thing. You're going to do 2, 3, 4 here. Then you're going to work on the analysis questions, 1, 2, and 3. Okay, and then I would assume you'd have to just finish this up for homework. Please remember your RQ protocol. Please remember it, okay? You should just be writing 1 sentence each. Restate and quote. Restate and quote for document 4, document 5, and document 6. Okay, this came up on the Regents, I want to say 3, 4 years ago. Many of the students in my class, I remember doing very well on this portion of the test because we had a very similar lesson today. So you guys should be in good shape when you're working on that. All right. Please let me know if you guys have any questions. All right. I'll be taking attendance and I will also be here if you guys need any help. All right.